and also, and I think we also see a couple of new attendees. Hello, welcome. Hi.
Good morning.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Journal Club this month. I know we have a few people that joined the room early that'll be coming back in, and I'll manage that process. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Holly Duckworth. I'm proud to be co-founder of the American Mindfulness Association with Eric Szymanski, who's also joining us today. And this event is curated by our Research and Scientific Committee, and we have two of those amazing leaders with us today, Jackie Kwan and Michael Copland, who are going to give us an update on what we're going to talk about. And just to honor your time, I know many of you are here for kind of the education piece first. We're going to do the Journal Club review first, probably for about 35 minutes or so. And then we're going to move into open questions and networking. So we'll certainly have an opportunity for that, but wanted to make sure that we got in our journal first. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jackie. Thank you so much for all your work curating this for us today.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much to our scientific committee co-chair, Mike Copeland, who also works very hard with us, picking articles and topics and trying to come up with valuable content for you, our participants and hopeful members. And regrettably today, Dr. Ann Berger is unable to attend. She had an extremely last minute, very urgent family matter that arose. So she very sincerely apologizes for her absence, and because the article that she was covering was so important, we really want to save it and allow her to present at a future journal club. And because it was so last minute, rather than canceling journal club today, Mike Copeland and I wanted to keep to the theme, a related theme of mindfulness and resilience. And we selected a small but important study on the role of resilience and mindfulness training for first responders. We thought that this would be a good study to discuss and would bring up some thought-provoking, good discussion. And essentially, we can build on this learning, and it will feed into Dr. Ann Berger's paper on spirituality, resilience, and mindfulness in the future. So with that being said, we will quickly go around the Zoom instead of go around the room. We will go around the Zoom. Just say your name and where you're from and your workplace. And then we will dive into the paper. And then, as Holly mentioned earlier, we really want to get to know you. We really want to understand what content you would like to see and hear about. And we would really like to network at the end. So we'll go around the Zoom. Holly, you already introduced yourself. I'm Jackie Kwan. I am co-chair of the American Mindfulness Association Scientific Committee under Holly's leadership. And then Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Mike Copeland, another co-chair of the Scientific Committee, and just happy to be here. Not much else to say for now.
Eric, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks. Welcome, everyone. Eric Szymanski, co-founder of the American Mindfulness Association here in Denver, and just welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi there, I am Jenny Blue, and I have my own company called Blue Thistle Transformational Leadership. I am here in Ohio and a board member of American Mindfulness Association, and just really happy to be here with all of you today.
Juliet, I'm so glad you could make it from across the pond.
Hi, I'm Juliet Adams from the UK, and my company is Ahead for Work, and I'm based near Cambridge.
And Ash Tosh, we give them a little bit about you.
Absolutely, Holly. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me in. Lovely to see you all. I'm Ashutosh. I run a experience transformation consultancy based out of Mumbai, India, but work with a lot of clients in US, UK, and Europe. And excited to participate in the conversation today.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. We love new faces. And I think we have one more participant that just came on. Yes or no?
Welcome, Diana.
Hi there, I'm Diana from Virginia, and I missed what I'm supposed to share about myself.
No,
Sorry.
you didn't miss anything. You're perfect.
Okay.
We were just sharing our name and where we're from.
Great.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining. So regrettably, we had just mentioned that Dr. Berger had a very last minute urgent family matter to attend to. But because she's the author and the clinician of the paper that she was going to present today, we really wanted to save that for a future journal club rather than canceling because it was so last minute. So Mike Copeland and I, to keep to the theme of mindfulness and resilience, we selected a study on the role of resilience and mindfulness training for first responders. And we thought that this study and this paper would be easy for us to walk you through. And then essentially it would be good learning, and we can build on this with Dr. Berger's presentation in another future journal club. So with that being said, we can dive right in and begin with the paper. So there's no pre-read, so we apologize that again for the last minute switch, but we will simply walk you through this very small study yet important contribution to the field of mindfulness and resilience and research. And Mike, if you could share your screen so we can walk our participants through the paper.
Okay, give me just a minute.
Sorry, Jackie, I made you the co-host and not Michael. Let me make him a co-host so he can see.
Okay.
Okay, make sure I'm clicking on the right one here. Okay, can everybody see this? The role of resilience in mindfulness training?
Perfect. Excellent. So we will share this link with you, and the paper is available as open access, so you can download it in the future. But the title of the paper is A Role of Resilience in Mindfulness Training for First Responders by Joshua Kaplan and colleagues from Pacific University. And essentially the study, it's a small study. The sample size was 47 participants. Two cohorts. They looked at firefighters and police. And essentially, we thought this was an important study because first responders are exposed to very traumatic situations. They're exposed to stress such as violence, assaults, and fatalities. And these stressors are linked to poor mental health among this group of professionals. Poor physical health, they have higher rates of suicide against the general population, higher rates of PTSD, and also reduced longevity. And so really what the study looked at was they took mindfulness-based stress reduction. If we can go down to the methods, Mike. Oh, go up. Oh, there we are. Go down. And if you could, I don't know if you could blow up the.
Oh yeah, let me try to make it larger.
And so what the study was looking at is they looked to see if mindfulness mediated burnout and the relationship with mindfulness and resilience and burnout. And so participants were recruited from the Pacific Northwest in a suburban community, and they looked at firefighters and policemen. So the sample size was 47, a small study, but still a decent size. And they took mindfulness-based stress reduction, or classic MBSR, and then they modified it and customized it to first responders. So essentially what they called the mindfulness-based intervention training was mindfulness-based resilience training class. So they looked at very specific measures, 3, and if you can scroll down, Mike. So it was 8 weeks. They measured mindfulness by the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire, or FFMQ. They looked at brief resilience scale. It's a very classic measure of resilience. And they also looked at a burnout inventory scale, the Oldenburg burnout inventory. And we won't belabor the statistical analysis plan, but if you go up, Mike.
Go back up.
Yeah, just we're not going to belabor the data analyses, but they did have a statistical analysis plan. They used a specific statistical methodology called the bootstrap method, but we won't belabor that. And you can look at the statistical methodology on your own if you like, but we'll go straight to the results. Okay. So the results were pretty important and consistent with their expectations. There was a significant main effect across the variables, and they did show that essentially mindfulness was indirectly related to uh, increased resilience and also burnout prevention. So it alludes to that mindfulness and may have a protective effect against burnout. And that's very similar to the literature that's been published, looking at resilience in other populations, because obviously mindfulness and resilience has been looked at in healthcare and teachers and caregivers, with family members with disabilities, but it kind of goes along that theme. And so, Mike, is there anything that you want to add here at all? No?
No, I don't think so. Not right
Okay.
yet.
And so essentially what was really interesting was that non-reactivity part, if we can go down. So they did a statistical analysis and they specifically looked at a component of the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire of non-reactivity. And non-reactivity was related to increased resilience, which we want to do a thought-provoking question at the end for the discussion. And it was related to decreased burnout. So essentially increased non-reactivity, which is related to mindfulness, was related to decreased burnout as an independent variable, meaning mindfulness may mediate the relationship with resilience, and then thus it decreases burnout. So they do have that as an important discussion in the paper. If you go down. And it was statistically significant. So according to the bootstrap statistical methodology, when it's not 0, it is statistically significant, and it was not 0, if that makes any sense. So the purpose of the study was to explore whether increased psychological resilience mediate the relationship between increased mindfulness and decreased burnout in first responders, and it did. And again, this was a modified 8-week training, modified mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it was designed specifically for first responders. So we thought this was a really interesting study. The weaknesses of the paper is that there was a lack of a control. It was not randomized, and it was a small sample size, but it was still important because it was statistically significant. And when you're looking at a population like this that deals with, major stressors, trauma and violence against the general population, it really does add to the body of research that mindfulness can be an important tool in the armamentarium for psychological resilience and well-being. That is basically the paper. And Mike, do you have anything else to add, or should we cover anything else? If not, maybe we can open the
I
discussion.
don't know. I think there's an awful lot going on here that, in terms of the implications. I mean, obviously, what they're trying to do is to add to the literature on, resilience. There's a lot of work, even just a common understanding that some people are more resilient to stress and trauma than others. And to what extent can resilience training build, that improved resilience among people to mitigate stressors, whether they be acute stressors or, very significant traumatic events. I worked in the railroad industry in the federal government for many years, and one of the projects that I implemented was to try to, help people deal with the traumatic exposure in the railroad industry. It's a very high hazard occupation, and on a routine basis, people are, getting killed or severely injured, and they have a number of people who have to respond to those events. And not only that, but locomotive engineers, for example, often have exposure to people committing suicide by train. And, how do you deal with that? Historically, there was a lot of emphasis on what was called critical incident stress debriefing programs many years ago. And it turns out that, requiring people to attend uh, post-traumatic exposure with specific attention to it can actually cause harm. So it changed the whole methodology about how to deal with that. But this really addresses a whole different issue, which is how do you build resilience, especially in those populations will be experiencing some kind of traumatic exposure or chronic stress on a routine basis. I think that's a really important question. And also, what this implies too is to what extent does this apply to the general population in terms of just overall resilience training for people? I think what it's suggesting is that there are a myriad of ways to build resilience, and mindfulness training appears to be one of the mechanisms that works. And so, it'd be worth hearing your thoughts on this and your experience and understanding of the role of mindfulness training for building resilience.
Yeah, so we'd love to hear from you in general, your thoughts about, the relationship between mindfulness and resilience. Any comments?
Yes, Juliet.
I quickly looked at the business case doc, which is related to mindfulness research studies specific to the workplace. And a very quick skim found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 20 different research studies. But one that immediately leapt out was number 31. Mindfulness is associated with fewer PTSD symptoms, depressive symptoms, physical symptoms, and alcohol problems in urban firefighters, which is a 2011 paper published in the Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology. And 124 firefighters were involved who had PTSD symptoms, depressive symptoms, physical symptoms, and alcohol problems. And anyway, the end result was that mindfulness was associated with fewer PTSD symptoms, depressive symptoms, physical symptoms, alcohol problems. Mindfulness reduced PTSD, depression, increased well-being and resilience. So I think that there is quite a good evidence base.
There really is. And this really speaks to, thank you so much for pulling that up so quickly and for sharing that. And, it really piggybacks on what Mike said. And, you're looking at a dire participant population, a dire population that deals with, very, very high stressors against, other professions. So one of the really neat things about this paper was they really pointed out to non-reactivity. So non-reactivity was identified as one of the 5 most important components in the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire. And so they specifically did an analysis on non-reactivity, and they thought that non-reactivity was a precursor and a really important factor for changes in increased resilience. And so what the paper alludes to is that the higher your mindfulness increases, you're able to essentially self-regulate or have what they call non-reactivity, which is related to increased resilience, and it kind of has a protective effect against burnout, which is really fascinating. And the paper goes on to say that, there are other important mechanisms that are not well understood that could mediate the relationship between mindfulness and resilience, that we just don't know what they are, and there's more research needed. But what do you all think, or what are your thoughts about the non-reactivity component of mindfulness and resilience? And how does that maybe relate to perhaps self-regulation? Ashutosh, am I saying your name right?
You're pronouncing it perfectly well, Jackie.
Oh,
But if it makes it easier, you can call me Ash. That's how I'm known as well. So feel
oh,
free to call me
wonderful.
Ash. But you
Yeah,
brought up very, yeah, sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
please share your thoughts.
So you got a very important point out, Jackie, about non-reactivity. So whatever I'll be sharing now is based on my experience of working with two sets of people. One is the trauma surgeons. So I was working on a patient experience case, and I happened to work very closely with the trauma surgeons as well as one of the people who closely I interacted with and engaged with. And on the other side, there is a very big police training academy very close to where I stay, not too close, 40 miles from where I am, but I happen to work on a digital transformation project for them. And I happen to notice a very common thread between the two. In the sense, for me, my assumption going into these projects and interacting with these people was that the sheer nature of work that they are involved in, they must be desensitized to what they do. So there must be a distance that comes in because of it, but it means that they are not sensitive to what's happening as well. But to my surprise, it wasn't the case. They were very sensitive to what people were going through and what traumas they were facing and so on. But they had to work efficiently and effectively despite what they were feeling in. So the non-reactivity component was clearly there. But in my experience, I saw a relation between the five facets. So what I observed is that the non-judgment part is the value. The non-reactivity is more like an attitude, and it's because of this value and the attitude that the behaviors of right observation, right description, and acting with awareness comes in. And for all of this to happen, there is a need for the best people to have a sense of distance, a third party observation to what's happening around and to what's being needed of them individually. And whoever I talked to, who I was told that these are the best in their group, I could see that they have this automated response of a third person connect to the environment and to the people, where they're not desensitized, but they have a ingrained value of non-judgment and ingrained automated behavior of observing the right things, describing the right way, and acting with awareness, but all fueled by the non-reactivity, which is the observed attitude. So while the non-reactivity comes to the fore statistically, I see that it's deeply linked with other facets which don't come to the fore but are as prominent in pushing the non-reactivity out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is, and you have the kind of front row seat view of that. Does anyone have anything else to share as it relates to non-reactivity and resilience? Because I think that that is such an important mechanism, and I love how you framed the non-judgmental component of that relationship. Juliet?
To me, the non-judgment and non-reactivity is so important. But in my experience in the workplace, often if you say non-judgment, people rail against it because most people in the workplace are paid for the quality of their judgments. They're assessed on their judgments. So for me, it's a language thing, and I tend to frame it as suspending judgment or allowing things to be as they are, or deciding not to react, because then it feels for some leaders more empowering. But you're quite right, it is the ability to not react that's the really important bit, because it stops the chain reaction of thoughts, emotions, physiology, which takes you away from the present moment.
I love that. Ash, I love what you shared. And then Juliet, I love how you built on that, because you're right. I think non-reactivity to, you know, I mean, for me, I'm still a baby at mindfulness, in my opinion. I'm almost 3 years in. But I have to say, pre-mindfulness me, I would have not, to exactly Julia's point, I would have not been able to relate to what non-reactive or non-judgment actually means. So, as we are advocates of mindfulness and advocating for mindfulness in workplaces, because all of us, we truly believe it's a very simple yet powerful tool that so many of us could be taught. It's trainable and learnable. Does anyone have any comments to add to Juliet's about what, a non-mindfulness practitioner or a new person to mindfulness in the workforce, what non-reactive or not what non-judgment may mean to them?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for the comments and for inviting further discussion, Jackie. I don't want to blend the non-judgment and non-reactivity because they're certainly very closely related, but I think in at least my understanding of this study is when it comes to the non-reactivity, taking on the crisis of mistakes can happen during a first responder situation. And if you're stuck in that, oh no, I just made this error, and then you take on the emotion of the negative connotations of what did I do to make things worse here. I think if you're not reacting to a crisis situation, and I would like to build a bridge to the corporate workplace, take this and expand upon it and think about I love what Mike said about, the railroad industry. And you think, well, is there a relation here? Is there a correlation here? And absolutely, because in a stressful situation at work, let's just say, we can all have a first responder-esque type scenario, a deadline or something where you're forced to work in a very time sensitive, urgent, critical moment in your day. How you're reacting to the stress. Did you even notice that the stress is happening? Did you have the awareness piece of what is becoming potentially distressing to you? I think this study does shine a light on how, I mean, granted, so many questions, 8 weeks, 50 people, what time of year was it? Was it a high, peak stress time for firefighting and police? Was it a relatively slow time of year? What part of the country was it in? What were the age of the participants? Who were they? I would love to see a little bit more on this, but I think from the small sample size, obviously Pacific University recognizes the potential limitations in their results, but I do like how you can say, look, where is being fully present in a first responder, inserting 8 weeks of mindfulness resilience training going to impact your solutions in that scenario? And if we're not going to burn out because we're in these high stress, high crisis situations that are, let's face it, probably life and death, where in our workplace, is it really life and death? I always, think about that. It's like, well, are we really saving, someone's life in this moment? Maybe, maybe not. However, taking a look at the non-reactivity piece, there's benefits to non-reactivity. It's been studied how it impacts anxiety, how it impacts creativity. There certainly is so much that you could look at from this study and take a much deeper dive, but I think there's great insights that are shared, and you look at the statistical significance of just how mindfulness impacts first responders and their burnout. It's just another wonderful example of how this work can impact you and how an individual can go down a path of burnout, or you can take proactive actions using mindfulness for your own and your workplace positive results. So thank you for sharing that.
Mike?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to say that, a lot of what research is trying to do is to sort of parse out these elements of mindfulness and what it really means, the five-facet mindfulness questionnaire and non-reactivity and non-judgment and all of that sort of thing. In reality, though, the practice of mindfulness meditation is really about, how you relate to your own thoughts. And first of all, becoming self-aware of that relationship, and then realizing that you don't have to go into these rabbit holes of self criticism, or this self-aggression in a way is what's actually happening when we are worrying and thinking about what we could have done or should have done, or all these other things. And just, it's not like we're trying to put those thoughts aside, but it's essentially building that relationship as if you're treating your own mind as your own best friend. And the how to do that, I think, is really the critical question. And obviously the traditional approach is sitting meditation. Um, but what others have done beyond that is develop these 8-week training programs and shorter versions of these training programs. And um, what I'm particularly interested in are these micro practices that can help cultivate that as more of a habitual attitude, and help cultivate the awareness, first of all, and the understanding of how you can befriend yourself in a on a regular basis.
Like that. Well, Mike, you've taught me so much about, I don't know if everybody knows this, but Mike Copeland is an organizational psychologist by training. So he teaches me about organizational psychology and organizational behavior. And so, as we are out there advocating for mindfulness and, building resilience, and how an individual bounces back from an adverse event, which is the definition of resilience, Mike has taught me the importance of building resilient organizations. So as we're all out there, you know, advocating for mindfulness and increasing resilience in individuals, it's really, really important, this paper, that if you can increase resilience in this group of individuals, the likelihood of being able to build resilience against the general population, or, at a regular workplace, in the corporate setting, or what have you, and other workforces, it's very telling, and it's very encouraging that not only does increased resilience, not only is increased resilience possible with mindfulness training, but it also decreases burnout. I thought that was incredibly powerful, even though it was a very small sample size. And I really like Mike's work because, again, he teaches me about, and we often talk about at the organizational level, how you would increase resilience at the organizational level. No one has really shown that yet, and I think it's coming because, Juliet was very quickly able to pull up all of a sudden 30 papers on resilience and firefighters. But in looking at the resilience literature, when we were kind of just trying to pick a paper to cover today, there were hundreds. There were hundreds of papers on resilience in many different populations, healthcare workers, nurses, workplaces, in, spousal relationships, it went on and on and on and on. So, really.
Jackie, one of the pieces that I'm curious about as you read this paper, and Michael, as you have a chance, if you can put the link in the comments, is that piece around modified MBSR, because that can mean everything from micro practices to, okay, 20 minutes for 8 weeks or 7 weeks or 5 weeks. That may be a topic we want to unpack in the future. And it's one of the things that I'm most excited about curating this ecosystem at the American Mindfulness Association is recognizing research can connect to teachers, that can relate to practitioners, that can even relate to technology. But when we say modified MBSR, that opens up just such a beautiful Pandora's box, that I'd be curious, as you read that research, did it define how that was modified?
It did. So it was still
Okay,
8
great.
weeks. The very last class, instead of 2 hours, it was actually 6 hours. And they customized it for, this particular group. And so, when we're all out in our workplaces and we're trying to connect with our audiences, one of the things that's in the literature is, if you're training a group of nurses, it'll probably be helpful to design a program, with a nurse, or at least look at a program from a nurse's perspective or insight, to make the content more relatable. So, I think that that's a really, really important topic, is
Context.
that's in how you, and the context and how you customize it to very specific workplaces. Because, again, Mike and I talk a lot about, and with Holly and with Eric, we talk a lot about, how do you implement mindfulness at an organization successfully. And, you see certain themes that, a program by a nurse for nurses is very helpful, is more helpful than, a school teacher teaching nurses. So if you're doing a mindfulness program for teachers, it would be really, really helpful to get insights and design, or, slightly customize it for, by teachers for teachers. But you kind of see that in some of the literature. It alludes to it, but it's not completely striking.
Getting back to your part of your question there regarding the modified version of MBSR. I mean, you have to think historically, MBSR was designed and intended for a clinical population of pain patients. And that was the foundation of it. And it got widely published and studied as a evidence-based protocol for mitigating pain. And since then, people have been adopting that, but it's essentially it's an intervention. There are many different ways of designing interventions with the elements of mindfulness. It just so happened that he had a very intensive protocol and an intensive 8-week program that not only required 2 hours of classroom training or interactive training every single week, but in addition to that, giving guided meditations that people were expected to practice at least 40 minutes a day. That kind of training is not feasible in most organizations. So being able to design something in more micro practices, I think, is very appropriate, but to the extent that the micro practices can have a similar cumulative effect as other more intensive programs. There's increasing research to show that that's effective. The one thing that study did not say was how much people did practice every day. It was basically 2 hours a week for about 8 weeks, with the exception of training, with the exception at the end it was a 6-day conclusion, or 6-hour conclusion.
Juliet, that was excellent, Mike. Thank you.
And I agree with everything you say, Mike. I really do. And because I have a particular interest in adapted MBSR and MBCT mindfulness programs, in the research summary, I started to pull out where there was data available, shortened practices, shortened durations. So there are a number of papers tracking that. I won't bore you with the numbers, but if I just grab
Please
that.
do.
So 6-week duration, 5-week duration, 4-week duration, shortened 4-week, duration of teaching sessions 30 minutes, 1 hour, practice requirement 10 minutes or less, which there's quite a lot, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25, etc. So, you know, they are starting to be included, and there is a growing evidence base that shorter
Right.
practices work really effectively, especially in a workplace context, whereas therapeutically, typically it needs to be slower, more gentle. In the workplace, often quite direct 10-minute meditation sessions can work really effectively.
Really excellent discussions because so my background, I have a 25-year background in program administration and biotech, and particularly in drug development. And so the way that Mike and Juliet are describing it is there is in the literature, MBSRs and mindfulness has a quote unquote dose. It is described in the literature. There are several papers that describe mindfulness as a dose. So in drug development, when we think about the gold standard, if you will, the most widely studied quote unquote dose, we call it the backbone. So if we think about mindfulness-based stress reduction as the most widely studied, and that is essentially our backbone. But what Juliet said is exactly right. And what Mike was alluding to, that, you know, workplaces, you know, we're all starting to see the benefits of what mindfulness can do for health. They're very broad and can be extremely empowering for organizations. You know, we all know that. And in the new literature, what Juliet is saying is that these brief practices are more innovative and they are showing very encouraging effect sizes. And there was a meta-analysis that was published just, I want to say it was just last year. It was by an individual named Van Dam. He was from Colombia. Now he's leading an institute in Australia. But essentially, he was posing the question in a meta-analysis of what's the dose of mindfulness? What do you need in terms of mindfulness practice to see a well-being benefit? And it was a fascinating paper. This could be a future topic of discussion, but essentially the conclusion of that finding is that duration matters. So it's not the quantity or the amount that you do in the beginning, but what really mattered is that it was a non-linear well-being benefit. And the further out a practitioner went, meaning in terms of months and years out, practitioners continued to reap well-being benefits. So it was a really important paper, and I really love this discussion because I think, so many people are busy, and we think about none of us having enough hours in the day or enough time. Even my friends who say, how did you make the time to learn mindfulness? It's a journey. But the fact that it's the innovation of these studies are going towards these brief practices that Mike and Juliet were talking about is very, very encouraging. It's just really neat, really neat.
Well, I know that we could talk about this until, New Year's, and so many of us are so passionate about the topic. Juliet's probably already clicked and got the actual research that you were just speaking about on her desktop, that we are so grateful to have such a diverse community here. And as you said, Jack, we don't have a lot of time, but I do, want to open up the conversation on Diana, welcome to the community. If you had any thoughts or insights or a burning question when you have your mindfulness colleagues in one room, let's just kind of open it up for the next 10 or 15 minutes for open networking and discussion.
We'd love to hear from you, like what you want to see out of American Mindfulness Association, what you want to see out of Journal Club, and want to get to know you. We really want to engage with our participants, and we also encourage participants to present if they would like. So if you really would like to present the next journal article, we would love and welcome for you to do that as well. And yeah, we want to get to know you and want to improve our content. Any comments?
I would just add, I really am enjoying these journal clubs. This is the second one, and I just love everybody coming together and just kind of noodling a little bit about it even after the presentation, and we're just sort of thinking about how does it apply to the work that we're each doing. And so I just love the community around this, and I've loved the topics the last 2 times. So I just thought I'd share that bit of feedback.
Any specific topics of interest that people would like to hone in on?
Has there been anything done in manufacturing that any of you know about?
Yes.
Juliet, you're off mute too. If I saw your hand go up.
I was just going to agree with Michael that microdose and lower dose programs would be an interesting one to discuss. Because whilst I agree, the longer the better from a neuroplasticity and a practice point of view, if you can't get people doing it at all, they drop off the program. So sometimes a little bit of mindfulness is mindful enough for some people. So I'd really value a session on lower dose, shorter practices, that sort of thing, looking at the pros and cons, how little is too little.
Oh, that's a great topic. Yeah, let's do that. So the next journal club, maybe we can do brief practices and what the literature's showing, what the literature's not showing.
That has been
Suggestion.
one of our areas of interest as well, and so we've started some systematic reviews of that, and so we could probably go over some of those results, which I think are really fascinating. I mean, I have this theory that when you think about the dosage perspective, that a good analogy would be, looking at cardiovascular health. When it used to be taught and believed that you needed at least, 30, 40 minutes of running or vigorous exercise 3 or 4 times a week in order to show cardiovascular benefits. But now what they're saying is that it's not so much the intensity and the duration of that single practice, but rather, just getting out and walking, X number of steps, on average per day. So what I think you're trying to do with the mind is build a habit, and how you build that habit of how you think, being aware of your thoughts and how you relate to those thoughts on a routine basis, and building them into your daily routines in different ways. And to me, the opportunity is if you can craft those systematic practices into the workplace and get people to practice them routinely, they will take them home with them.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here,
Yeah.
is to really impact organizations and society more broadly by um, creating a common understanding of healthy living and healthy thinking.
Yes. That's so excellent because, we know that healthy organizations and happier organizations impact society more positively. I just, I love that what Holly and Eric, with them founding the American Mindfulness Association, and just trying to empower everyone who's trying to bring mindfulness to the workplace is such an important thing. And there's so much work to be done. But what's so exciting is that, when I first started, a little over 2 years ago, there were 20,000 papers, and today there's 30,000 papers. So Mike and I, we co-chair a scientific committee together. So I'm the data junkie, and Mike comes up with the big picture ideas. I've read 3,500 of these papers. I can't stop reading them. It's like it's my happy place. It's my flow, similar to Juliet. But it's so encouraging. It's so encouraging. And it's really just neat to think about that it can be such a simple yet incredibly powerful tool. And then how do we, as the American Mindfulness Scientific Committee and organization association, help you all and empower you to be better mindfulness advocates? So yes, we'll definitely do brief practices. That is such an excellent suggestion, Juliet. Thank you so much.
Any
I
other
have-
ideas?
Yep.
I think that this is a great time to say many hands make light the work too, that for every one of us that are here on this call, we probably have 5 to 10 or 25 people that we are like, gosh, we wish they were on this call. And so we would invite you to, invite friends and colleagues to participate. I'm going to put a link in the chat, which is the Journal Club page of what we currently have scheduled. And we hear you, manufacturing, we hear you, micro practices, that, if there is someone who wants to step in and say, hey, I could lead a September practice or a November practice, we're happy to share this as an opportunity for growth. I know I would add to the list, mindfulness and wisdom keepers or retirement, and how is it impacting that, because there's so much information there. And also, of course, mindfulness and technology. We will be continuing our technology forums into the fall as well.
Something I was
Juliet,
thinking about, sorry, is takeaways from this paper. The American Mindfulness Association is currently not making recommendations based on research, but I think there's some value in putting just a few takeaways from this research paper for Journal Club that we can publish in social media, amplify, again, the awareness of how this can benefit. If it works for first responders, it can work in your organization. If you're experiencing deficiencies in certain areas, turnover, depression, suicide, burnout, aggression, lack of team building, all the different things that this one study could be expanded upon in your particular customers' workplace, your workplace. If you're coaching or training on this subject, how this study can impact your results, I think that would be great as well. And this powerful study and group putting just some key takeaways together, just a few nuggets, and then we can help socialize. That would be a great, I think, just next step to put a bow on this particular session as well, right?
We can do that. Ash, you were going to say something.
So I was just curious to ask one question. Not sure if you have time to get that addressed in this session, but a lot of times I get asked this question, that how do we measure the impact of mindfulness, because it transforms you from the core inside out. And unlike physical exercise where you can watch your weight and measure how many pounds you have reduced, in mindfulness it's difficult to measure. But I came across this one very interesting conversation where the framework given was the triple R framework, RRR, which was recovery. If this was majorly on the addicts who were undergoing mindfulness training, and the measurement of impact was in terms of recurrence, like how many times do they feel like going for whichever habit that they are into, and how much it has reduced over time. The second one was, whenever they do, how much time does it take to recover from it. If they get it controlled within 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 hour, so what's the recovery time. And the third R was more about reaction, that when they actually suffer that specific instinct or whatever gets triggered, in what way do they react and handle it. So how intense is that reaction, and does the intensity come down. And based on these 3 R framework, they had measured the impact, and it was quite successful in terms of, I'll dig in the paper that was worked out on this and definitely share across, but would love to know, any other ideas on how the impact of mindfulness is measured as well.
Oh, excellent question. I'm going to let Mike take that one.
Yeah, we have a whole framework for measuring impact of mindfulness, and there's no really one specific answer for that, because it depends on the context, depends on what the needs are of the organization, what the resources are. But one way of thinking about it is really depending on the intervention. If you talk through that intervention with the key stakeholders, especially those who would be impacted by that intervention on the front line or who plan to use the training, ask them the questions. If this were successful, what do you think would be the first level of outcomes, right? And following that, then what are the longer, medium terms or longer term outcomes from that? And so different stakeholders who are involved in that process, and now you can build a logic model of ways of collecting evidence to support that as you're moving forward. And so examples of programs that we implemented, an intervention of, we got feedback and said, well, one of the first things that would happen would be improved communications. All right, well, what does that mean, improved communications? In a labor environment, they said, well, we would have fewer investigations and fewer grievances, right? And if you look at the cost factors of investigations and the cost factors of a grievance as a result of that process, now there's a really strong evidence that it is having an impact on the organization and the costs. And sure enough, when we started tracking that data, we showed significant reductions in grievances, significant reductions in the investigations, and also reduced liability long term. So
Yeah, some studies have looked at reduced litigation, reduced error rates, reduced productivity. They've done better sleep. So for those of you who don't know, Mike works with an expert methodologist. And so Mike has literally looked at like many different measurement instruments. I mean, you can measure empathy, stress, burnout, resilience, recovery, productivity, error rates, sleep, fatigue. It goes on and on and on. So yeah, Mike, I love how you said that it really depends on the organization and asking them, how do you see success and what do you think should be measured?
But yeah, we could have a long conversation about that, but I think that the quick answer is that it depends. But if you systematically ask the right questions to the right people, you can figure out ways of collecting good quality measures that are practical, useful for decision-making purposes.
And Dr. Berger, who unfortunately couldn't join today, she was the chief of pain and palliative care at the National Institutes of Health for 25 years. And she spent over a decade developing and validating a measurement instrument that measures psychosocial healing. So it's one of the pinnacles of her life's work and career. So in the future, when she presents the spirituality paper, she will be presenting that measurement instrument. It's called NIH Heals. We can put it in the chat.
Publicly available because it's a government-sponsored study. So you could probably even use that instrument as a pre-post measure.
Right.
The nice thing about these validated tools is that, from a baseline standpoint, they are often predictive of, where, collectively an organization may be in terms of their mindfulness or common practice. So it could be used also as a diagnostic for certain elements of where to target your intervention, and then also as a post measure for having some effects, and knowing that it's already been validated to have a relationship and correlations to certain kinds of outcomes.
Well, really excellent discussions and excellent insights from everyone. Thank you so much, Ash. It was so lovely to get to know you and meet you. And Diana, thank you so much for joining. Really thanks to all of you, because Journal Club is not Journal Club without all of you. So we can't wait for future content. And it sounds like we will be doing brief practices in manufacturing in the future, but the list is endless. So with that, thank you again so much for joining us. And we really hope that to see you again, and we really want to make Journal Club yours. So
Thanks so much.
Have a wonderful day or evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.